I'm here today because, like Ian, I'm a trustee of the Radiation Research Trust. Ian is a much better person than me to chair this session because he is at the very least scientifically trained. And the contribution that I have always tried to make to this subject is to try and make sure that it is science that predominates, because it is an area where there is a great deal of concern and fear and scare. And it seems to me that it is through the science of all of this that we manage to make some progress in identifying risks and laying scares, hopefully, to rest. I became involved some time ago through Eileen, who is a constituent of mine, and who I think has done a fantastic job in bringing this subject to much wider attention. And indeed, it was through her that the Radiation Research Trust got set up, and Ian's and my involvement began. So I shall now slide quietly away and leave matters to Ian. And I think we are hugely privileged to have such an eminent speaker this afternoon. And I know that he's preparing to speak for half an hour and then to answer questions, which I think will be valuable. So you're all very welcome to the House of Commons, and I hope very much the session will shed some light on a very important area. Thank you very much for your time.
I hope you're taking public transport to running CO2 into the atmosphere.
I can't be using my mobile phone on the way.
Okay, well, I hope there's no maths around thank you very, very much all for coming. Indeed, I've sort of lived with this problem through constituents coming to see me in local papers campaigning on the issue for several years now. And it's something that won't go away as far as constituents in Norwich are concerned, and right across the country. And although we don't have the kind of evidence that we might need to make the rational, sort of scientific decisions, which are, pretty foolproof, not that science is ever foolproof, but it's pretty good at it sometimes getting things right. It knows a virus from a bacterium, for example, that causes a disease. We can find things out. I think a lot of people are very demanding of more work being done in this field to find out what the problems are. I joined the Radiation Trust because I've always been concerned about low levels of radiation, be the overhead pylons, or whatever. And as somebody who did genetics, when genetics was always an offshoot of botany in the old days, we were taught that no radiation is really good for you, that there's always some kind of mutation takes place and so on. Well, you have to balance that up, of course, against the benefits. I mean, science is about benefits and risks, and that's what this debate is about. And the public have made their decisions for whatever reason. I'm not going to hear about that today. But as the science moves forward, I think it helps to inform the debate. So we're very, very fortunate today, I think, to have somebody who's a very distinguished academic who's come across from the United States. And they're not always the best scientists, I always used to say that, but they're pretty good at it because they're well funded and they can do research. So we're looking forward to hearing how good your research is and what kind of results you have. Please try and convince us. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, and this is indeed an honor for me, and I hope that what I can share with you over the next 30 minutes or so will be of use to you as you move forward in trying to solve this ever-evolving and ever-morphing problem of electromagnetic radiation and health risks. My involvement in this project or issue began in 1993 when, following a lawsuit that was brought by a husband whose wife had died of a brain tumor, there were congressional hearings mandated in the United States. And during those congressional hearings, it became clear that cellular telephones, which at the time were being used by 15 million Americans and about 50 million people around the world, had been exempted from pre-market testing. In other words, cellular phones were not tested for safety before they were put into commerce. The reason for this, as came out in the hearings, was that the cellular phone industry had received this variance from the Food and Drug Administration based on the recognition that cellular phones transmitted at very low power, and that at the time, the only mechanisms of harm that were known had to do with heating of biological tissue, to wit, microwave oven studies. And based on that low power exclusion, cellular phones were exempted from any type of safety testing before they went into the marketplace. Because there had been questions raised about whether or not cellular phones could be a cause of brain cancer, the Congress turned to the Food and Drug Administration and asked them, what are you going to do about this? Because as I mentioned at the time, there were 15 million Americans using a device now which had been exempted by the government from safety testing and about which safety questions were being raised. In the United States, the Cellular Telecommunications and Industry Association stepped forward and offered to fund research that would be intended to fill the data gaps that were there because there was no pre-market testing. And in exchange for that, the Food and Drug Administration agreed not to regulate them. I was the person who was charged with running that program. I was given $28.5 million in 1993. The money was put into a trust. An interagency government working group was put in place to oversee the work. At the Harvard School of Public Health, we enlisted an independent peer review board to peer review all of our work at the protocol stage, at the data analysis stage, and at the final report stage. The paradigm that we followed was the regulatory paradigm that would be applicable to a consumer device like a cellular phone that releases radiation. So pre-market testing for safety, post-market surveillance to make sure that mistakes were not made in the pre-market testing. We set about doing that work following appropriate in vitro, in vivo models in the pre-market testing phase, as well as the development of new exposure systems based on the dosimetry of how people actually use cellular phones. We also set up a series of epidemiological studies that at the time we intended would give us baseline information, but that indeed is the beginning of what a post-market surveillance program should look like. We went forward with that program with more than 200 doctors and scientists from around the world participating. In 1999, we came forth with our findings, and there were several findings that we did not expect. We were able to confirm, for example, that cellular phone radiation, near-field radiation, caused leakage in the blood-brain barrier. We identified for the first time genetic damage caused by non-thermal radiation. That genetic damage was exhibited by the presence of micronuclei in human blood. We also found in our epidemiological studies more than a doubling in the risk of neuroepithelial tumors among people who use cellular phones when compared to people who did not use cellular phones. At the time we had these findings, we went both to the Food and Drug Administration and to the cellular telephone industry, and we suggested strongly that they let the public know what was found. Their response was that they didn't feel that the data were strong enough to warrant a public warning. Thank you for your work. We'll take it from here. We felt that that was not an appropriate response. to $28.5 million of research. We went public with the findings on our own, and in the time frame of 1999 to 2001, there was a very famous worldwide split between the scientists who had conducted that work with the $28.5 million and the cellular phone industry. While I was head of that industry's research program, I was sued a couple of times by people who had brain tumors. And I was brought into those lawsuits on the premise that I was withholding information from the public about the dangers of cell phones. When we published our findings, and subsequently I have 3 books now that are out on the subject, it became clear that we were not holding anything back. The plaintiff lawyers came to us and asked whether or not I wanted out of the lawsuit. And a settlement was reached where we gave the plaintiffs $1.25 million, which was what was left on our insurance policy, and they gave us back $250,000 in cash to set up a post-market surveillance registry. Based on setting up that registry, we established the Safe Wireless Initiative. Now, the Safe Wireless Initiative is a project in the nonprofit Science and Public Policy Institute. The Science and Public Policy Institute was established in 1992, and over that time frame was involved in a number of projects involving public education and public health. We were, for example, responsible for overseeing how commercials for smoking cessation were to be conducted following the settlement between the Attorneys General in the United States and the tobacco industry. With the $250,000, we put in place a post-market surveillance registry which, had the regulatory authorities been taking regulatory steps, would have been put in place anyway. It's important to understand that in the United States today and in Great Britain today, cellular phones and wireless technology are not regulated for safety. Because of that dearth of regulation for safety, we established within the Safe Wireless Initiative a continuation of the work that we had first embarked on with the $28.5 million from the wireless industry themselves.